спасибо, что дожили до 17. Я, честно, переживал, что зал будет пустой, но...
Thank you so much for lasting until 5 p.m. I was really concerned that I would be speaking to an empty room, but I hope that the name of my presentation got you interested. So we'll be talking about the actions of Chinese APTs in the territory of the Russian Federation. So I decided to spice my serious technical slides up with funny pictures to make it easier for you to go through my content at a pretty late time. So let's start with the Who Am I slide. This is the 10th year I've been doing cybersecurity, and my work is all about incident research and investigation. I started as an engineer in the first-line defense, first-line operations of SOC, and now I'm actually heading the division of Rostelecom Solar. So we are doing digital forensics, reverse engineering, threat hunting, and various studies and research primarily related to security incidents. My plan for today is like this. First, we'll talk about the Chinese APT-related attacks in 2021. We'll also talk about tactics and techniques. It will probably be the shortest talk of this kind in your life. We'll also talk about the malware code, and the core of my speech, and, well, the main intent, so to speak, of my speech will focus on how this, Chinese IPTs started VIPNet in 2021 and found great ways to abuse it. So I'm not going to classify, all this stuff and tell you that this particular IPT did this or did that. If you've been reading security reports, you probably know that there are lots and lots of Chinese groups, like over 100 groups, which is obviously a technical impossibility. I think, as an industry, we have not really learned how to properly identify groups. So we'll be saying these are Chinese APTs, and I won't go into the jungle of distinguishing them. So there was this announcement earlier today. They found, yet another APT with Asian roots. We're treated to this kind of announcements every day. Yeah, I think it makes very little sense for us to try to distinguish between them. So, throughout this year, and it may sound weird, but in fact, there have been a total of 10 investigations we ran in 2021. So you may remember this well-known 0-day, which was later on called proxy logon. It was abused by Chinese hackers all over the world. And, we were able to see 4 organizations attacked using proxy logon in a matter of like 36 hours. And in the following 9 months, we only saw 6 different incidents. And you may have thought that, the Chinese would only attack governmental institutions, but no, this is not the case. In many of these cases, they were IT contractors. Actually, some of them were cybersecurity contractors, and not just contractors to the public sector. Many of them were supporting or serving private corporations. So this is my promised slide about tactics and techniques, and I'm not going to talk about that. And the reason is very simple. Last year, these Chinese gentlemen and probably ladies did nothing that would really merit your attention. I guess you know all this stuff about PowerShell and CMD and what have you. And I think there was even a report earlier today by a gentleman from Group IB. So I'm thinking they covered all these tactics and techniques. So rather than repeat it all, I will just say very briefly several things about the areas shown in yellow here.
эксплуатация публичных уязвимостей. Здесь, как было уже
So
отмечено,
first one is exploitation of public-facing applications, and this includes proxy logon. But there is also like lots of web-related stuff, particularly legacy applications.
Единственный кейс с этим связанный, о котором мы сегодня будем говорить,
The only case I want to cover is CV 2019-3890, and I'm covering it because I've not been able to find a single report stating that this one has been used in the wild, particularly by a Chinese APT. So I want to correct that and tell you what we found. Phishing naturally gave us a bunch of cases. Now I guess that many members of the cybersecurity industry got this spear phishing letter. So this PSA was released, in November, 11th of November 2021, and they tried to actually spear phishing on its basis like 2 days later. Tomorrow on Fast Track, some experts will be talking for like 20 minutes about this particular CV, and I think it will be better for you to visit this particular or that particular report rather than listen to me here. And again, we'll go back to VIPNet, because VIPNet indeed is the biggest pain of 2021, particularly when we're talking about Chinese APTs. So let's discuss the vulnerability that was exploited back then. When people read SolarWinds, I understand that may give you jitters, but it's actually a different case.
Пользовались таким программным обеспечением, как DMVAR Mini Remote Control. Это просто средство.
I guess many of you here have been using DMVAR Mini Remote Control, which is actually a good remote admin tool. IT administrators often use it. So one of these organizations had issues with their NAT tables. And it turned out that the managing port of this software was exposed. So they sent their disks to us. We started analyzing this case. And it did what you often do in digital forensics. We studied artifacts. We found complex cache, which suggested that an executable could have been launched from C Windows temp. Now, in real life, a binary launched from C Windows temp tells you nothing, right? Next, we started the USL log, which is yet another artifact which effectively logs all file-related operations. And we found that pretty much at the same time, a log was created, which could be easily found online when searched for together with the name of the executable. And Google told us that this was this particular software, DMVAR. And as we analyzed AM cache, which is another branch of the register, which is logging processes being launched in the system, we made the conclusion that the executable file was running the operating system, and you can actually see this overlap of timestamps. And this is how forensics experts often make their conclusions. So the service itself has logs, and sometimes these logs will talk about errors. Same case here. DMVAR has got two service logs where they write error information, and the access log for USSN actually shows the IP address from which we got hacked, or rather the client got hacked. And the POC for this particular vulnerability is available on GitHub, and it contains the same executable file. It's actually exploiting the same service, which is authenticated through smart cards. So, it does create, it sort of, as a puzzle, it clicks together.
Конечно же, мы сегодня проговорим про малварный код,
Naturally, we are going to talk about malware code today.
все типы
And here in
семейств,
this slide,
которые мы
I've
за
tried
этот год
listing all
видели на
the
территории Российской
families of
Федерации.
malware that
Вот
we saw in
для вас
2021
правая
in the
часть — это
territory of
то,
the
о чем мы
Russian
сегодня не
Federation.
будем говорить.
The right-hand
Либо это
part
не имеет
lists all
смысла,
the
как
things we
там
are
с
not going to
скобой с рэком,
discuss
либо мы
because it
там
makes
на
no
каких-то других
sense, as is the
конференциях,
case with Kabul
реклама, да,
strike,
например, на СОК-форуме, мы отчасти этого
or
функционала
because we have
проносили и
already
рассказывали.
covered this
Левая часть —
topics at other
это
conferences
то,
such as
про
SOC
что
Forum.
сегодня мне
Shown
бы
on the
хотелось
left
рассказать, потому
is
что
the
это
stuff
либо
I would
вообще
love
не
to
описано
cover
с внутрь,
today,
либо
because
описан, но
those
не
either
публично,
have not been
либо просто
described at all,
это известный инструментарий, но там есть какие-то малые
or they are
изменения,
well-known
которые, может
tools,
быть, исследователям и
but
аналитикам, которые
they
работают с
actually
девелопментом
have
кода,
some
как-то
tweaks and
помогут, и
changes that
они
could be of
учтут эти
interest
заметки.
to malware
Начнем мы, наверное, с
researchers
Shadowpad. Это
and
один из
analysts.
самых
Let's start with
известных
ShadowPad.
китайских
Now,
инструментариев.
it's one
Впервые он,
of
по-моему,
the
был известен в
most
2017
popular
году,
tool sets
когда
of Chinese
поломали
APTs.
Asus
When
или
Asus
в
and CCleaner were broken, it was another
Что нужно про
supply
него
chain
знать?
attack.
Это
It was
модульная
the time when
разработка
ShadowPad
ПО,
was
которая,
first
соответственно,
noticed, so to speak. So
модули которого живут фактически
the
физически в
modules for
реестре, имеют
ShadowPads,
некий
they
свой
physically sit in
идентификатор,
the
который,
register.
кстати,
They've got their own
до этого
IDs.
года они
And until this year,
были уникальными и, в принципе, гуглились. То есть вы
they
могли
were
загуглить
unique
типа Shadowpad
and they could be Googled.
и
So you could
любой там
actually
Windows
Google
скетчик, он, в
for
принципе, хорошо
ShadowPad
показывал, что это
104
такой-то или
and any
такой-то
vendor
модуль. Вот в этом году,
report
соответственно,
would
ребята
explain that
эти
this is module such and
идентификаторы
such.
полностью поменяли. Опять
So
же,
the guys
хотя
changed
фактически
their IDs earlier
внутреннее
this year.
состояние и внутренний код плагинов
However,
они не
the
поменяли.
internal code of the
Вот.
plugins
Также
is
на
still
слайде
the same.
я предоставил список всех известных модулей.
In this slide,
Вот,
I'm
по
also
которым, в
listing
принципе,
all the
видно,
known
что это
modules,
полноценный бэкдор, который позволяет, в принципе,
where you can actually see that it's
любую
a
функциональность снайперской
fully
системы.
functional backdoor,
И задача
which
главного модуля
effectively should
Shadowpad —
enable you to run
это,
any function
назовем
in
это
the
некая
operating
прослойка
system.
между, соответственно,
So
физически
ShadowPad
существующими
is
плагинами в реестре
effectively
и
an
оперативной
intermediate
памяти процесса. То
layer
есть он
between registry,
читает из,
plugins,
соответственно, реестра
and
модуль и загружает его в память. Что
memory.
важно, модули являются
So it will
неполноценными
read a module
файлами. То есть
in the register
это
and
позиционно
will
независимый
write it
код,
into the
shellcode,
memory.
который имеет
It's
также
a
свою
position-independent shellcode,
тот
which has its own header,
который там вы можете
but
использовать,
it's
не
not
знаю, в
the
любом PE Explorer,
not the PE header you can study in any PE
В
Explorer.
чем отличие? Мы даже его назвали Shadowpad Lite.
We
И в этом
actually
есть
called it
следующие причины.
ShadowPad
Если вы
Lite
возьмете
for
любой
the
отчет
following
по
reason.
Shadowpad, то первое, на что
If you read any
бросится
report on
вам
ShadowPad,
глаз,
the
там
first
есть
thing
две
you are
истории.
going to
Во
notice
время загрузки,
is that,
соответственно,
A,
главного модуля
during
есть
the
некая обфускация, которая
loading process of the
состоит
main
из
module, there is some
двух
obfuscation
одинаковых
happening.
прыжков, вставляемых, которые,
In
по
fact, there are
идее,
two
прыжок прыгает
identical
на
hops.
один участок кода, соответственно, условный и безусловный. И, это,
The conditional and
давнейшая
unconditional hop to the same
обфускации,
piece
и
of
там
code,
при этом дизассемблер, он
which is
его
a
немножко
node
от
obfuscation technique.
ему от этого
And the
плохо, и,
disassembler,
соответственно, если вот этот байтик отдельно не выделить от инструкции, он, соответственно,
won't really like it.
показывает
So if you don't
кривой, грубо говоря.
separate
И
this
вторая
byte from
история,
the
вот это
instruction,
справа,
you may show
это
something different. So
некая
what we're showing here
обфускация
on the
API
right
вызова после того, как динамический
is an
резолвер происходит.
obfuscation of an API call. So
В ходе
after
работы кода
dynamic
появляется
resolving
некая структура,
happens,
которая, грубо говоря, немножечко
a
эти
structure
API-колы делает не прямыми, а через
emerges,
вот эту структуру.
which makes this API calls
И
indirect.
есть некая структура, заголовок модуля, про который я говорил, который отличается от стандартного PE,
And
но
there's finally this module header, which is different from the standard PE, but it has been described and hasn't changed for a long time. So in 2021 cases, the ShadowPad that we saw
просто не было. Я не знаю почему.
didn't use any of these obfuscation techniques. I don't know why. Maybe they just got tired, or maybe lots of detection tools were trained on this particular elements of the code, but they dispensed with it. Also, they changed the module header, and interestingly, if you read it from bottom to top, you would see the timestamp string, and the compilation time could be read, throughout the years, so to speak. It was easy, therefore, to see when a particular plugin was created. So unfortunately, in 2021 cases, we're not able to obtain the timestamps. I think they just, sort of corrupted it. Maybe they were tired of this, easy way to track them.
Next
one is backdoor check rest.
Ничего в нем такого какого-то удивительного нет.
There is nothing
Но
particularly
он
special
очень
about
важен в
it,
плане, потому что, скорее всего, он
but it is
имеет
important
очень большой и богатый функционал, но мы не
because it has
смогли
numerous
получить
features and
полное о
functions.
нем
However,
представление. Вот, и
we were
нашли
not
его,
able to,
соответственно, при инцидент
build,
респонсе в одном из
compile
указанных
proper
кейсов. Ну, то есть
understanding
у
of it.
него почти
Yes, we
стандартная
did our
рабочая
incident
цепочка
response in a
загрузки.
particular
Даже не
case. So
будем
it
его
has a
говорить, я
pretty
думаю, на самом деле все
usual
понятно.
loading
Вот,
chain, loading
у последней
sequence.
крайней DLL единственная задача это, соответственно, загрузить
And the
модули
final
с
DLL here has the single
удаленного
function
сервера
of
и через
loading
технологию
modules from a
REST
remote
DLL,
server
соответственно, подгрузить эти DLL-ки к
and
себе,
then
опять же, в
load
оперативную память
this
процесса.
DLLs
Все
into the
модули,
operational
работа
memory.
каждого модуля в итоге финализируется в какой-то зашифрованный файл
Now,
с
every
своим
module
уникальным расширением,
final
который,
results
соответственно,
into
живет в
an
этой
encrypted
операционной
file
системе.
with its own extension,
По
which,
коду видно,
will
что
persist in the
создатели
operating system.
предусмотрели до
Now, the
16,
code
возможность до
shows that
16
the
модулей
creators have provided for
для
up to 16
данного выносного
modules
программного обеспечения. Ну и, соответственно,
for
главный
this
модуль, после того, как
malware.
все загрузил,
And
плагины эти
after
отработали, он
everything has
собирает
been
все эти
loaded
зашифрованные
by
файлики
the
и
main
отправляет,
module, it will
соответственно,
collect
на
all the
свой
encrypted
сервер
files
управления.
and will send them to
Нам
their
удалось,
CNC.
после того, как мы, ну, соответственно, кусочек вредоносного кода зацепили, получить всего лишь 3
Now,
модуля.
after we're able to
Вот,
find
ну,
this
там, скриншоты,
malicious
keylogger,
code, we're
наверное, это,
able to obtain
ну,
only
даже
3
описывать нет
modules.
смысла, потому что здесь все
Screenshot,
стандартные, здесь стандартные
keylogger,
протоколы.
they don't really merit
Интересным
any
нам показался
description.
только
They
третий,
contain the
который
usual
модуль,
API calls.
который,
It's the third module which we
создает
found
окно и
interesting.
отслеживает события
So this one
девайса
creates a
вызова,
window
которое, соответственно, наступает, когда
and
подключается
it
внешний
tracks
там, диск. И,
events
соответственно, ну, этот
of
модуль отслеживает все
device
подключения
retrieval
внешних
type.
дисков, дальше,
So
соответственно,
device connection or device retrieval type.
Ой, видите, видимо, не попало, простите. Да, дальше, соответственно, отслеживает все файлы по расширению XLS, doc, docx, PDF.
And it will be tracking all the doc and XLS
Еще
files.
интересный факт, что при шифровании
An
модулей
interesting
здесь
fact
используется
is that
алгоритм генерации
for module
случайных чисел,
encryption,
который известен как
they are
вихрь
using
Мерсена.
the so-called
До этого,
Mersenne
насколько мне
Tempest,
известно,
a
подобный
particular
алгоритм использовали
RNG
все
algorithm.
корейские ребята и
From what I
по-моему,
know,
украинские.
North Korean dudes and Iranian
Дальше,
hackers
следующий
previously used the
инструмент,
Mersenne
про который
Tempest
хочется
method.
рассказать, он
Next one I want
PowerMail,
to talk
честно, взял
about
название
is
от
PowerMate.
языка. Вот, у нас он
Now,
там
I took this
внутри называется
name
просто
from
PowerShell RAT.
Kaspersky Labs.
Мы там
I think
сами
we
не
actually
придумывали
internally
это
call it
название. Вот.
PowerShell
В
RAT.
2020 году, я не знаю, наверное, не у всех
In
руководств может быть, есть в
2020,
коммерческих отчетах, то есть это не публичная информация,
commercial
это
threat
отчеты
intelligence
по,
reports,
грубо
and again,
говоря,
this is
внешней
not public
регуляторной
information,
лаборатории.
right? So
Они
these are
сказали, что они
reports you have to pay
видели
for.
этот инструментарий
So
в Вьетнаме.
commercial TI
В конце
reports
2020 мы видели в,
said that,
соответственно,
this still
государственных
says
организациях
were
применение
seen in
этого
Vietnам.
инструментария, и мы выпускали с НКЦХ закрытый
And
отчет.
we were
Там это
seeing
есть.
this
И
still
вот в
used
2021 году мы
against,
этот
I guess,
инструментарий
public sector
неожиданно, опять же,
organizations in
встретили для
Russia.
себя в коммерческой
And in
организации.
2020 and
И
late
такие,
2021, we found it in a
ну, такая
private
полупубличная, в принципе,
corporation
в
in
целом,
Russia
поэтому было
again.
принято
It's a
решение, что мы про этот
semi-public
инструментарий
company,
можем рассказать. Здесь
so
история очень
we decided it was
простая.
okay to
В
actually talk
результате
about it.
DLL-хайджекинга
It's a pretty
сервиса
simple case,
по
due to DLL
распределению
hijacking of
ключей IP
the
сека, виндовая
service
это стандартная,
that does
загружается
distribution of
специальная
IPsec
DLL-ка,
keys,
которая
DLL is loaded,
задача которой найти следующий
whose
стейджер,
function
написанный
it is
на
to
.NET,
identify the
и
next
вызвать
stager
методы.
written
Вот
on
ниже
.NET
это уже методы,
and
соответственно,
summon
коды на
methods
.NET,
inside it.
которые ищет в
So what you see
директории
here is an
program
excerpt
files
of the
PNG
.NET code,
картинку
which
с
is
определенными
looking for a
параметрами,
PNG
то есть шириной
picture
больше 32
in a
пикселей
particular
и
folder,
высотой
which,
больше 120,
has width over
пытается ее
32
декодировать.
pixels and height over
Вот так вот
120
выглядит
pixels and
в
tries
целом
to decode it.
картиночка.
So this
Декодирование
is the
происходит
picture.
по известному достаточно
Decoding
криптографическому алгоритму LSB, это наименьший значащий бит.
relies
Вот, наверное,
on
не
the
будем
least
сегодня по нему говорить.
significant
Единственное,
bit
скажем,
methodology.
что
Probably we
именно этот
shouldn't even
алгоритм
discuss
позволяет
it.
создавать такие
So it is this
такие
algorithm
картиночки с
that
зашитой,
enables creation
зашитым
of
кодом, который, в
pictures,
принципе,
steganographic
вот на
pictures,
глаз
I
не
should say,
воспринимается как что-то плохое.
which
Ну,
will
соответственно,
not
оттуда
attract anybody's
достается
scrutiny
PowerShell код,
usually.
который первый
So
стейджер
PowerShell
PowerShell кода,
codes
который
can be
поджат,
extracted from
пошифрован.
it.
Вот, он сам
So
себя
it's compressed
обрабатывает,
and
и
encrypted,
в
then it sort
результате
of
запускается
processes
полноценный
itself,
RAT, который, вот я посчитал,
and then, a fully functional RAT will be launched, and it's a lengthy one, 1,500 strings, and in terms of functionality, it has all the key features and functions you would expect in a RAT.
Мы его для себя,
The next
опять же,
tool set
внутри
we
и в
found,
публичном отчете, который мы
now
делали,
both internally and in the public report that we
на самом
did,
деле этот
we
инструментарий
actually called it
имеет еще
Mail-O,
название в публичном
Web
пространстве как
Dev-O.
S-менеджер, или вот коллеги
It's also called S-Manager,
его Rimshell.
and people in
Вот
positive
в
technologies called it
2017
REM shell.
году он был тоже
So back
первый
in
раз найден в
2017,
пространстве, он
it was
представлял
first
себя написанный
discovered
код на
in
C,
the
C++,
wild.
ну вот
And back
использовал некие
then, it was
пространства.
written on C and C++.
В 2019-2020 году создатели этого
In 2019,
инструментария
2020,
полностью перешли на облачные
creators
сервисы,
of
и
this
в качестве
toolset
сервера управления они использовали либо Mail,
migrated
либо
to
Яндекс,
cloud
либо
services,
похожий
and they
на
used Mail
В
or Yandex or
2021 году
Dropbox
мы
for the
нашли,
CNC.
соответственно, версию, которая
In 2021,
полностью
we found a
переписана на Go.
version
Вообще, наверное, это какой-то
which was
такой тренд,
completely
что
rewritten
ребята,
on Go.
которые, собственно, они
I
очень
guess it's
много
a
раньше
trend
писали
now.
на C, на C++,
People
сейчас
who previously
являются,
wrote a
к
lot on
сожалению,
C
к
and C++,
радости, просто факт. У них часть
fortunately or
инструментария на
unfortunately,
Python, вот
are
теперь вот этот
migrating now
вводоносный код перешел полностью
to
на Go.
Python
Вот.
and
Ну
now
и, в
to Go.
принципе, наверное, здесь-то больше и добавить нечего.
I
Вот.
guess this is
Ну,
it.
теперь мы, наверное, подойдем к истории с Витнетом и расскажем,
Now let's talk more about VIPNet. So I'll tell you what it was like.
нашего, соответственно, большого
So
сока
JSOC,
зафиксировала
first line
подозрительную
of
активность
defense,
в мае
registered
2021
suspicious
года в
activity in
4:38.
May
На
2021
хосте
at
заказчика, на котором есть
4:38
Витнет,
on a
Витнет
host running
администрирует
VIPNet.
IT-подрядчик, то есть
And this VIPNet
голова
is being
Витнета
administered
не
by an
у
IT
нас.
contractor,
Это очень важно.
which means that,
Фиксирует
we do not
запуск
see the
вот
head,
таких
so to speak,
процессов.
of VIPNet.
Соответственно,
So
они,
we
у них
saw
есть
these processes
понимание,
being
как
launched.
аналитик, они собирают необходимую информацию, которую должны там приложить к
as
тикету, и
analysts,
дальше либо там через заказчика, либо через эскалацию поднять это
they
вверх.
need to collect information to attach it to a ticket and then escalate or not. The parent process for this process is a Drive API
Любой аналитик, любой форензик скажет, что
launched from
пока
temp.
ничего нифига не понятно.
Now,
Да,
any
ну, то есть, опять же,
analyst
Windows Temp, туда очень
will
много
probably
всего
say,
делается,
well,
всё
it's too
запускается.
early to
Окей,
pass a judgment. It's the temp
но есть
directory.
еще проблема. Расследуя дальше, оказалось, что
As we continued our research, we discovered that the parent process for Drive API is a legitimate process
Тут, конечно,
for the
у
update
ребят там
of
с
the
первой линии
VIPNet
вопросы.
system.
Потому что
Now,
на
this
хосте,
actually got people in the first line
нету
interested,
ни logon type 3, ни logon
because
type
on the
10. О чем
host,
это говорит?
there
О
is
том,
no
что
logon type 3 or logon type 10,
RPC,
which means that no RPC, SMB, RDP,
цепочка
nothing.
вредоносных процессов возникла из ниоткуда.
So this
Ну, как
chain
бы
of malicious
здесь
processes
эскалировали до нас, да, вот
seems to have appeared
группа
from
делала
nowhere.
расследование,
So
мы
they
на это
escalated
посмотрели.
to us.
Что вы первое сделаете? Правильно, вы сделаете.
What
Окей,
would be the
Google.
first thing you would do?
Ну, конечно.
Sure, you would Google
Хорошая
it.
картинка, извините. Мы тоже сделали окей, Google, и окей. Мы такие нашли. Хорошо.
So we Googled it, and we found
Мы прочитали.
this vulnerability dating back to 2017.
Вредоносным кодом обновления. Думаем, блин,
So
наверное,
create
оно.
a fake
Но тут есть одно но.
file
Во-первых, версия
with malicious
клиента была
code
выше,
masquerading
чем
as an
указано в релизе.
update.
А самое главное,
However, the
если
version of the
аккуратненько
client
прочитать,
was
здесь
higher
есть
than the one
прям
mentioned in the
оперативная
release.
фраза.
Actually, if you read it in detail, you will see this phrase,
У нас, вспоминаем, не было
running off
никаких
ARM.
сессий. Никто на хост не заходил.
We didn't really have any
Что нам
sessions.
делать?
Nobody
Нам нужно
really
разбираться в
accessed
том,
the whole
как
system,
работает
which
обновление
means
VIPNet. Мы начали
that we
разбираться.
had to learn how VIPNet updates
Первая
worked.
картиночка в левом верхнем углу – это прям выдержка из
Left-hand
документации.
top
Что
picture
обновление
is
происходит
an excerpt
через
from the
архив,
manual.
формата
Updates
SSH.
happen through LZH archive files
Что,
provided by the
как,
vendor.
где, ничего не описано. Нету ничего. Единственное, что мы там,
No
ну,
additional
грубо говоря,
information.
попросили у наших
Nothing.
администраторов
Zilch.
установленный VIPNet и
So we
потыкались. Вот
asked our
есть
admins to
некий
install VIPNet, and we
администратор, у него
played with
есть
it.
функционал
So there is
обновить
this
программное обеспечение,
VIPNet
туда
administrator, which has this function for software update, and there you should actually upload the archive, and it will check if it's a legit
Ну, давайте
update or not.
разбираться глубже, как все это работает, и нам это все пришлось, потому что
Now
иначе
let's
бы мы так и
check out
До нас
how
так
it
бы не
works.
дошло, как все это работает.
Because, had we
Что
not done
такое
that, we wouldn't have
формат
been able to address it properly.
архив LSH? Мы, соответственно,
So
честно,
what's
мы
an
взяли
LZH
архив
archive?
с легитимным обновлением у наших администраторов. У нас
We
тоже есть
took the archive
администраторы
with a
VIPNet, и
legitimate
попросили, и дальше,
update because we
соответственно, мы
do
взяли
have
этот архив
admins of VIPNet
и
as well.
взяли, соответственно,
So
нам
we took
пришлось
this
провести
archive
реверсивный анализ некоторых исполняемых
and
файлов.
we had to do
Что в
some
итоге
reverse
выяснилось?
analysis of
Есть файл
executables inside
actioninf
it.
в составе
And it
архива.
turned out
Дальше
that there
я
is a
не по
file
каждому
called
файлику буду
actioninf as
рассказывать.
part of the archive.
Это файл,
I will
который
give you
описывает,
details
в
on each
принципе,
file naturally.
действия, которые
So
будет
this
делать
one
система
describes
обновления.
the actions
Есть
that the system is
исполняемый
going to go
файл
through
обновления,
during the update
либо, вот
process.
как
There
на
is also the
картиночке, вложенный
executable
архив. То есть
update
вы
file
можете
or the
вложенность
archive
архивов
file.
делать до бесконечности. Ну, для
And
этого
you
там
can
дальше
actually
покажу, что нужно
nest
сделать. То есть, грубо говоря, нужно в
as
файле
many
actioninf
archives
написать, что
inside
есть
each
еще
other
архив, есть
as
еще
you
архив,
want.
и
So
просто
you can
система
indicate there
обновления
is
будет
more
архивировать
inside, there is
никому
more
до конца.
inside, and so on.
Есть list data, это текстовый файл, который содержит, соответственно,
And there is list
перечень
data,
файлов
which
и
is a text file which
контрольную
contains a
сумму этих
list of
файлов
files
по определенным
and the
алгоритмам.
control sum
Файлы
of this
description
file.
version здесь не имеют никакого значения, потому что это просто текстовый
And
файл.
description and version files don't matter at all. These are text files, so you can put any information in them.
Вот, соответственно, файл, который называется actioninfo.
So
У него
action
есть
info
два
file
варианта.
comes
Action
in
либо
two
архив,
versions.
архив. Это вот, как я говорил, если у вас
It's
есть
either
вложенный архив,
archive.
то,
This is
соответственно,
what I
система
mentioned
обновления понимает,
previously,
что
a
внутри
nested
пакета есть еще
archive.
архив, его надо
This
разархивировать.
way,
И внутри
the
этого
updating
архива
system
будет
will
также файл
understand
actioninfo.
that there is
Либо у вас есть
another archive
экстра команда, это вот
internally,
как видно, просто
or
у вас уже
there is extra
обновление в
command,
Excel лежит в
which
пакете, вы
means that
должны
the
его запустить.
update is inside
Окей,
this current archive, so you need
но
to
вендор
launch the
как бы
exe
не
file.
так плохо. Он проверяет подпись
The vendor is
через
not that bad. See,
Verified
they
Trust
are
Exec,
actually
call, через который
checking
обычно
the
проверяется
signature through
исполнение
verified
файла.
trust exe,
И
which is
даже
an
проверяет,
API
чтобы
call,
цифровая
and they will
подпись
even
соответствовала
check for the
всему.
digital
Этот
signature
файл подписал именно вендор.
to be valid, to
Вот
be
так
in
вот
fact
выглядит
signed by the
файлик
vendor.
list data.
So
Сразу
this
скажу,
is the
что
list
из
data file.
там хэша берется один dword. Вот, и есть
So they
несколько
take
поддерживаемых
words,
алгоритмов. Ну, гасты, понятно,
word
это гаст
from the
prefix,
hash,
это
that's
HMAC
it.
256, ключик на HMAC,
So
он произошел
gas
в бинарном.
FIPS
То
is
есть это, в принципе, тоже можно как-то использовать.
SHMAC 256. So I
В
guess you
принципе,
can
вот
find a way to
ровно
use this
так
data as well.
работает система обновления. То есть приходит архивчик, проверяется action
So
info.
this is how updating works. The archive arrives, action info is checked, then vendor's signature is checked
Все файлы, и если всё
against
ок,
the
то он
hash.
просто запускает
If
этот
everything is okay, it will launch it.
Сделаем чуть-чуть шаг назад. Когда в том кейсе к нам попал диск, естественно, ну там особых логов там ничего
So when we
не было,
got the disk
но
back then,
мы сумели
there were
там
no
следы
logs or
удаленных
anything,
файлов найти, и вот в принципе
but we were
видите,
able to
action info,
find
list data,
traces
это
of
похоже
deleted
на вот
files.
RIP-API, который запускался. Это в принципе
And you
похоже
see the
на
same names here,
структуру
list
нашего
data,
обновления. Ну, естественно, в глаза
driv,
бросается
and
что?
driv API.
DLL-ка, NHLL 32 DLL, то есть
And we
откуда
also
она здесь,
see a
зачем,
DLL
и
on
это нас
LJ32
подтолкнуло
DLL.
на дальнейшие,
And
собственно,
it
исследования.
looks weird,
Мы
doesn't it? And
нашли
it did
некий
stimulate
исполняемый
us to
файл,
further
который есть в
research.
составе
So
VIPNet,
we
и он
found
подписан
an
VIPNet.
executable which is part of VIPNet,
Это
and it's signed by
LHA
VIPNet.
архиватор. Ну, собственно,
It is
он
indeed
open source.
LHA
То есть что взял вендор? Он взял
archiver.
open source бинарий и
So what they
подписал.
did was to
И
take an
цифровая подпись
open
действительно
source
валидна.
binary and
Есть одна
sign it,
маленькая
and their
проблема.
digital signature
Он
is
подвержен
indeed valid.
уязвимости DLL хайджекингу.
The problem
А что
is
это
that
значит?
it
Это значит,
is
что рядом
vulnerable
вы
to
можете положить
DLL
библиотеку,
hijacking,
и
which means that
запускаться
you
у
can
вас
put
будет
a
только
library
LHA-экзек,
next
и
to it.
цифровая подпись будет проверяться только у него.
And,
А все, что будет в DLL, вам нужно просто
when you
просчитать от
start
него
LHA exam,
хэшик. И всё. И
it
он
like
оценится в
only the
памяти,
digital
это классическая
signature
история, и
for
дальше
the
вы
exam
имеете
will be
возможность
checked,
запустить
but not
произвольный
for
код.
the DLL, and then you will
Как
be
это
able to
работает?
execute any
Мы
arbitrary code
сформировали, собственно,
in the
архив.
DLL.
Как видно,
So
вот
we created
подложили
an
этот
archive,
бинарик, подложили DLL-ку.
and we put it next to the binary,
Соответственно, action info выглядело как просто экстра команд
and
LHA-exe.
action
Дальше мы,
info
соответственно,
was like
просчитали
this, LHA
хэши
exec,
для
extra
всего
command.
архивчика в
Then we
файлике
calculated hashes for the whole
list
archive
data.
in the list
Ну,
data
и в
file.
целом все. В DLL
And
мы
that was
просто
it.
добавили, мы даже его не стали переписывать, мы просто туда
We
добавили секционно
didn't even
шелкод, который
change
запускает
anything in it. We just added the
CMD-exec.
shellcode to it
Ну и,
that
соответственно,
would launch
результат,
CMD
вот
exe.
видите, да, мы
And this
отправили
is the
пакет
result.
обновления с центра на
We're able
VIPNet
to
клиент
send
любой машины,
an
и
update
он запустил
package,
произвольный код.
and
Окей,
then
с
we
этим разобрались.
initiated arbitrary code.
Следующая история, которую нам нужно немножечко понять для того, чтобы
The next
дальше
thing we need to
рассказ
explore
был, так сказать, в одном русле, и мы понимали,
in
как
order
ребята
for
работали,
this
это
whole
некое
story to make
понятие
sense
VIPNet конвертов.
is a VIPNet envelope.
Давайте вот так вот. Вот, да. Как он работает? У
notion.
него, понятно, есть координатор, еще VIPNet-клиенты могут общаться.
So VIPNet has got a coordinator, and VIPNet clients can
все компоненты VIPNet-клиента,
B2B can talk horizontally, but all components of VIPNet, be it mail or secure transport or file exchange, all this stuff works through VIPNet converter. All information going from VIPNet client to coordinator or back, it will all be packaged by a VIP converter. Physically, it's a file. It has CTL format, and it uses a random key to encrypt the data, and the random key is encrypted with the exchange key. So if you want to send a letter, which obviously makes sense, if you're using VIPNet, so you're sending a letter like "Hello, John," and it's converted and packaged. And there is a special service which tracks every 3 seconds if new files are delivered to the out folder. So once a file shows there, it will send it to the coordinator, and it doesn't check anything, it simply dispatches.
Теперь, наверное, тоже интересная история с малваркой, которая написана была с использованием VIPNet функционала. Сейчас я расскажу, о чем
was written using VIPNet functionality,
как это все работает.
And I should explain why I've been telling you about envelopes. The infection algorithm was like this. On the left, we are saying what is still a black box to us. These were, IT contractors to our client. And due to numerous reasons, political among others, we have not really done any incident response on their side. We are still hypothesizing about it. So in the client's infrastructure that we are monitoring, we are seeing this host with VIPNet, and they would get, these envelopes with updates. As a result, this vulnerability was exploited to launch malicious code, to execute malicious code. So if the system was disconnected from the internet, but it was connected via a particular port in the machine, it would initiate a reverse shell. If it was connected to the internet, it would get a sample of the malicious software from the slide I showed previously with special functions for bypassing VIPNet firewall. I'll tell you more about it later. So it just, contained an element of code that was, responsible for it in DLL.
У него есть несколько этапов. Первое, она исполняла, соответственно, команды,
которые
нужны для разведки сбора информации о хосте.
Would execute commands required for reconnaissance and collection of information on the host. After that, it would delete all the logs related to MFTP, which is effectively responsible for exchange of envelopes, which makes forensics much more difficult. Then, they would collect all the main information on configuration files, keys, business emails, VIPNet client firewall settings, and various text files. And all this data would then be exfiltrated using the transport envelope of the VIPNet. So the first stage is collection of information on the host. And this is the kind of activity that our first line of defenses was able to spot. So this is the information that was found there. Then the seed of this random data there was saved, and I'm showing where it goes. So if it is saved, reproducing this random sequence will not be difficult. After this information was collected, all the host level logs would be wiped in order to hide information on any updates being received. It was easy to do that. They created an empty file and then they did a copy with with the Y flag, which means that this request for overwriting would be suppressed, be executed. So this is the first file, and you can see that at a certain time, packets of a particular size arrived at the host. In update RS log, you can actually update service log. You can actually see that it was extracting all sorts of things there, and you can see the GR code there, which means that hashes were checked, check success. It shows that, all digital signatures were checked. And naturally, all this stuff was wiped as well. MFTP debug log. So it contains client API ID and MFTP log, which is a transport module log. Was wiped as well because it could help the forensics experts. There is a database for MFTP envelopes. And through VIPNet administrator, you can actually check it out. So it shows that an envelope was dispatched, it was received, and it shows the sizes. And so, if you're sending binaries, naturally, the size of the package will be different from, a regular envelope. So here, rather than doing something sophisticated, they would simply wipe lost N operations. There are 3 folders where the malicious code would put the information, put the files that have specific elements in their names. So DB obviously refers to databases, and they will also be looking for XML files, configs for VIPNet and what have you. It contains some critical information. It has some TXT files containing information on the clients. So they would compile an archive from all these documents. They would encrypt it, and the password would be run. And you see that, most importantly, it's collected all the business emails, and it would be easy to decrypt it, really. After that, when information on the host was collected and information on VIPNet was collected, they would create this envelope sort of manually. So you see the header, the name of the envelope, and the size of it, which corresponds to host information. Then it's encrypted, and it becomes something like this. So this is the service envelope of VIPNet. It has a header against which it's checked. It also has the name of the sender, the address, and the name of the recipient. And the service header ends with the address of the recipient, which means that all the information that MFTP2 needs to resend the envelope to the coordinator and for the coordinator to send it to the recipient. It's, the top 4 lines effectively. A signature, sender address, name of the envelope, and recipient address. So for exfiltrated information, they would write some bytes there, and they would also do some betting, insert random bytes, and they also wrote the seed information there, and then encrypted data on the host follows, together with the archive, with the information being exfiltrated. Note that they manually provide names to envelopes. If it's sort of built in, we can use it as an IOC, indicator of compromise. And coordinators also have their logs, and they also have their MFTP service. So we can actually look for this IOC. We can actually look for, the recipient of this envelope. We would do it in an ideal world. Unfortunately,
источника.
Nobody really checks the address of the source
С реальным адресом
on VIPNet. Nobody checks for consistency between the address there and the address in the header, which tells me it's spoofing, right? If we know the real address of our VIPNet administrator, we can put it in the envelope and we can camouflage all the envelopes as if they're coming from the coordinator, and we'll never know the real address this way, which shows that, oh, actually, the screenshot shows that this address simply doesn't exist on the network. Which puts the lid on my story about VIPNet malware. If the host was connected to the internet, one of the tool sets I previously mentioned would be uploaded with a specific function for bypassing VIPNet firewall. There is an application control function there, which is actually good because it enables you to allow a particular process to do, say, network activity. For example, you can only allow operating Chrome to access the internet. And then, effectively malicious code that will try to access it will be blocked. So it does make sense to switch it off. So we found this piece of code there, which we hadn't seen before. Let's see what it does. So they are sending data directly through device controller to a VIPNet driver responsible for application control. So they send PID process as data. So it keeps this information in the internal list, and when the application tries to go outside, it will be allowed. Now, the problem is that they do not send it directly using the VIPNet tools, which means that it will not be shown in the logs. Nobody but the driver will know about it. So we're thinking, come on, they've been very serious about it. So, they've done their reverse engineering, and we've done their reverse engineering as well. But later on, we realized that it doesn't have to be that difficult. So in RFAPI DLL, you can check the classes and the methods, and there is a method there called addroom, which actually tells you what you need to send, and you don't really need to do any reverse analysis or debugging.
В качестве, наверное, окончания хочется сказать, что с одной стороны,
in conclusion, I want to say that, well, you can actually think all you want to think about this vulnerability, and you probably know that the vendor has not agreed it's a vulnerability. And DLL hijacking doesn't really surprise anybody in 2022, particularly when it's used by Chinese hackers. There is a minor problem, however. There are loads and loads of VIPNet networks in this country, and many of them are apparently closed, but at the same time, they're linking governmental institutions or banks or private corporations, and you will often fail to know who is administering the network, and this is bad.
Ребята сидят там. Вот давайте так. За год, за прошлый, было 4.
In 2021, there were 4 cases like this. 4 cases when this, malware update arrived on our radars. So it's more serious than it may seem. And my recommendation is how you pay attention to it. Naturally, we told the vendor all about it right away. How you understand what it may have been like, certification and stuff. They have published their update. And they said that, we were doing pen testing. Well, it is one of our functions as well. Who can blame them? And yesterday there was an update from the regulators saying that, you should better check how your AV systems get triggered, and if you have VIPNet clients and you're not entirely sure who the administrator is, or if you're not entirely sure which system you belong to, I suggest you pay more attention to it. This really puts the lid on my presentation. Thank you very much, and ask your questions if you have them.
Там вон вопросик есть. А вон там.
Over there.
Спасибо, отличный доклад. Можно немножко подробностей?
Great presentation, thank you. Can you please tell us more about how you dealt with the vendor? So you told him there is DLL hijacking. I'm seriously interested in what was your discussion like. Did you give him the signed exe file?
Второе было это.
Про обход контроля приложений.
And about bypassing the application control. And the envelope, right? And I understand that, you can actually sign the envelope whoever you are. So you ask him two questions? No, we first notify him about a way to bypass application control and DLL hijacking. The way they do security check is not exactly a bug. I'm wondering if it's still available. I mean, as an offense guy, I'm interested. Well, would you like to take this discussion offline? No, I'm just wondering, until which version, so to speak, it's still applicable. Well, you can check their updates. So they said they patched it on the 7th of April. Not a question, really. Chinese APTs, are they so good that they reversed customized software and at the same time they're using common shell? That's weird. I'm sorry, it's such a philosophical question. I'm surprised they were using common shell rather than going at least a level below. I really don't think they did any reverse engineering. This was our initial hypothesis, though. I do believe that they put Ethernet. If you know how they operate, I think 95% of things they do via DLL hijacking. I think they've got a conveyor system of some sort. I think, they have a particular routine for checking binaries for vulnerabilities. I can tell you that, we spent quite some time trying to learn about it because, manuals and admins, they live in different worlds. This is my hypothesis. I don't know what the reality is. Sometimes they modify UEFI, so you never know with Chinese APTs. I think you can ask them this question. I'm not sure they will answer, though. Thank you.
Все, да?
Is that it?
Майка вторая горит.
Здравствуйте.
There's one more T-shirt to go. Thank you. An interesting presentation.
Как можно предотвратить такие вещи? Например, нет, у меня такой.
How can we prevent things like this?
Вопрос. Если бы
It's a practical question, really.
на данном хосте собирались логи
Had
куда-нибудь,
this host been collecting logs
это могло бы как-то
on VIPNet,
облегчить поиск
would it make,
уязвимости?
Да.
looking for vulnerabilities easier?
Хорошая практика, да, собирать куда-то по максимуму.
Isn't it a good practice, to
Это классическая.
collect as many logs as possible and keep them as far as possible? Yes, that's the classical answer. In our recommendations, we wrote that, when you download VIPNet, there is a tick box called launch automatically without informing the user. So you may want to talk to your employees. So, for example, when the update package comes in, the update will be launched and the user will not know any better. Otherwise, there will be a notification like a new package is available. Would you like to update? And yes, what you say about collecting logs and monitoring for anomalous activity, they still apply for sure. Thank you.
Спасибо. Возможно, очень глупый вопрос задам, но
It may be
где
a very
китайцы
dumb
взяли
question.
VIPNet? Это же такой
But where
софт,
did the
который
Chinese
как бы не
find a
является...
VIPNet?
Нет, нет.
Isn't
Если
VIPNet
следите,
a
была
specialized piece
статья,
of software?
слушайте,
No, it
какая-то
isn't.
компания американская, она
There was an article by
пока
this
расследовали,
American
соответственно, как
corporation.
бы атрибутировали АПТ-группировку в коммерческие
You know,
организации.
when they were
А дальше они,
attributing
у них есть что-то
APTs to
типа...
commercial
Короче,
organizations,
они показали, как ребята, вот эти группировки, за которыми стоят коммерческие организации, якобы юрлица, все,
well,
они
because some APTs, you know, they're associated with commercial organizations. So, you know, these commercial organizations bought AV systems from different
Они
vendors.
взяли и купили VIPNet.
So they effectively bought VIPNet, is what you're saying? Do you believe it's impossible? Particularly if you are an advanced persistent threat.
Ну, не знаю.
What will stop you from buying commercially available software?
Так бы я не стал бы говорить. Ну, слушайте, ну, нет.
Are they this kind of people to do this sort of investments? You know what? There could be an easier solution. Maybe they hacked a company and just stole the installation files. Yes, this is another option. I heard of this case last year.
Но они забирали всю документацию по лаборатории Касперского. Именно
You
документацию.
know, they actually took all the documentation for Kaspersky Labs, you know. Maybe it's more difficult for them to, you know, do the reverse engineering side. I believe they, you know, they just collected it all and studied it in detail. I don't really know for sure though.
Спасибо. Подскажите, пожалуйста,
Thank you.
по трафику интересный вопрос. Вот вы говорили про то, что
I'm
там
interested in
упаковываются
traffic.
вот эти конверты.
So
Можно ли
you
как-то по
said
трафику
that
затрекать аномалию
converters do
по
this packaging. Can we
количеству, по-
actually track the traffic to
Нет.
detect an anomaly
Ваш администратор
size-wise?
скажет вам, сколько он,
Well,
пакетов,
will your administrator
не
tell
знаю,
you
администратор или это,
how many
нет? Ну, то есть для меня нет.
packets he
Если только по
sends?
размеру, ну давайте так.
Probably
В
not.
принципе, можно
Size-wise,
попасть
it
в
can be
размер.
done.
То есть там, опять же, это
But
такая
then you know what?
эвристика из уровня
You can actually mimic it.
обновление
So
VIPNet бинаря
heuristics there is not very different from guesswork.
16, потому что там один бинарь, ну, где-то
So
килобайт, может, 400 плюс...
every
ну, то есть они
binary
где-то
file there is
будут
like
больше,
4
например, там,
kilobytes or
200
so.
килобайт размер пакета, но меньше там 10 мегабайт. И вот,
So,
вот
for
если вот
example,
это всё
if
возводить в
all
рамки,
your
что это подозрительно,
files
то,
are
в принципе,
between
можно
200
попробовать.
kilobytes and 10 megabytes, will your system react
Там
to
всё
that?
шифровано. Там,
So no
стандартный
commands or
header,
anything,
для
everything is
которого, ну,
encrypted there.
который есть у конверта, а дальше у вас все просто
You know, the
половые
standard
данные.
header for an envelope like this and everything else is encrypted. Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое за доклад. У меня такой вопрос
Thank
по данному кейсу. Насколько полностью была описана активность на заказчику отправлена и какова была, в принципе, его
How
реакция
detailed
по
was your
скорости
report for the client and how
реагирования?
fast did the client respond in terms of, you know, incident
Мы сами
response?
реагировали на инцидент.
Well,
Ну, в смысле,
we were
в
doing the
рамках,
incident response.
доклада у вас прозвучало, что первая линия зафиксировала инцидент.
Okay,
и
but you
вот
said the first line
полнота
reacted.
донесения информации до заказчика. То есть
But I'm
достаточно
really
было
interested in like
аудита.
how detailed your report was.
Я не очень понимаю
Ну,
вопрос.
полнота логов
Was
была
an audit
достаточна
enough?
для полноценного посещения заказчика, либо это
Like
всё
how
равно,
complete your logs
зафиксировано в рамках,
effectively
типа,
were?
вот, был запущен какой-то процесс, какой-то драйвер, и все.
Ну, конечно, ну,
Like,
то есть,
did you just say, well, we identified this process and drive? Yeah, sure, we have EDR and sysmon on the host. And then as part of our monitoring scenarios, we identified anomalous activity as a SOC shoot, and then we started our investigation. So the initial information available to the client was that we see some suspicious process on your host. That was the beginning. Naturally, we realized that VIPNet was the culprit a bit later. You know, remember it all started at 4:38. You know, forensics people often have the right to sleep during the night.
Так, меня вроде слышно. А я еще хотел уточнить по поводу того, как именно отреагировали регуляторы.
I wanted to double check the reaction of the regulators.
Как вы уже упомянули, собственно, VIPNet используется в большом количестве различных
So you
государственных
previously mentioned that VIPNet was used in numerous public systems. I guess an event like this could have raised quite a lot of eyebrows.
Ну, как уязвимость.
I'm guessing that, they would even put some pressure on the vendor. The vendor did the update. They informed the authorities, this is it.
Я думаю, что она не к месту. Я говорю, мы там как участник обмена госсопки и, соответственно,
As a member of GovSopka Information Exchange, we sent the information first to vendor and second to the regulator. I guess now things will start happening faster. Not in terms of addressing the bug, but in terms of getting everybody's attention to this problem.
Здравствуйте. Вопрос касаемо дистрибьюции малварного вот этого пакета.
Question on distribution of this malware package.
Доступ к какой-либо машине, на которой установлен VIPNet, правильно?
Naturally, you initially need access to the machine, right? And going forward, it doesn't really matter what kind of privileges, what kind of rights the person has, because he should be able to craft this malware package or envelope and then distribute it. I talked about exfiltration or about propagation of updates, propagation. Now, on the left, in my diagram, it's still a black box. Now, I've been sharing our hypothesis. It still is a hypothesis. It may be the tip of the iceberg. Maybe there are other issues there as well, and they're hidden in the black box. We were doing our investigation. You're absolutely right. In order to start it all, you need access to some host on VIPNet. Now, we are guessing that they sort of did it through VIPNet administrator. In the internal terminology, it's called Network Management Center. But we don't have proof for that. We believe that these updates came from contractors, and we have not been able to inspect them yet. You know what? Lots of people besides us are responsible for security. I hope that they will be able to help us.
Следующий вопрос.
Some other vendor, you mean? Next question.
Панда из московского зоопарка.
Yes, the pandas in my pictures are from Moscow Zoo. What was the version of VIPNet in this particular case?
The
vendors wrote in their chat today that version 453 is completely secure as long as you apply all the rules. If that's okay, I'll come over to you and show this stuff because I'm afraid that my time is over.
Ой, что такое? Если честно, я не идентифицирую людей, задающих вопросы.
It's difficult for me. I haven't really identified the people who ask questions. So please hand it over to the person who asked about the vendor. And the other prize should go to the person who asked me this very provocative question about the version. Thank you.